Every challenge, every setback, and every rep, it all leads somewhere. You don't just endure, you evolve. Welcome to my podcast where we embrace the process and push beyond limits. My name is Chris Gilbert, and this is Endure and Evolve. Welcome back to Endure and Evolve, episode 11. We are going to try this again after some really bad technical difficulties yesterday, but I'm excited because today is our first attempt at a video podcast. Essentially, at this point, we're just making YouTube videos. Can you really call it a podcast? But I guess if you're not watching the video and you are just listening to it and you're getting the podcast experience, there you go. But if you want to get the whole video to this, where we are going to be showing some clips of what we're talking about, head on over to our YouTube and then you can watch it. So I'm here with my lovely wife, Marisa. And we are going to be talking Spartan 101 with the Gilberts. And this is going to be the Eastern Canada edition because obviously we haven't done races out west and we've only done a couple in the United States, so it's going to be Eastern Canada. So glad you're here with me.
Thanks for having me.
So as we had practiced yesterday, kind of outlining what is a Spartan. If you're listening to this, I'm assuming that you either have done one and
or interested.
Yeah, or you're looking to get after one. And this episode is really going to be tailored towards someone looking for some more information around doing a Spartan race. We're going to kind of go over the ins and outs of what Spartan racing is, the different types of races, the heats, the penalties, the obstacles, and then some tips that we've learned over our history of racing. So, Spartan. If we did a quick backstory, Spartan started with Joe DeSena out in his area where he started with the Beast Race in Vermont, and it has exploded from there. Spartan racing is an obstacle course race. Typically, it's on a mountain. It involves a race over a set amount of distances, and you're going to do obstacles. I think it's a fair way of saying it.
We're not affiliated with Spartan.
Yep, there is absolutely no affiliation with Spartan in doing this podcast. I am a prior ambassador. That has since been stopped. And really, this podcast is just coming out of 3 years now of racing experience. Between the two of us, we have over 40 races. Marisa and I have done multiple trifectas. Last year, we actually wrapped up trifecta times 3, which we'll get into if you don't know what those are. We've raced essentially the whole gambit, shy of the 24-hour hurricane heat, the Agoge, and the death race. There's not much that we haven't tried Spartan-wise, I guess, other than some venue locations.
Yeah.
So you're thinking about doing a Spartan. Where would you even start? I think it's best to just let's go over what the races are. Like what are...
kinds of races are.
Yeah. So Spartan is built out of obstacle course racing. There is endurance events. There's trail races. And there's, I guess, the stadiums, which are still the normal obstacle course races, but they're going to be done more in metropolitan areas in a stadium. I think that covers the type. So first and foremost, we have the sprint.
So there's like 4, I guess, main, what their bread and butter are the sprint, the super, the beast, and the ultra. That's the main Spartan community that the majority of people are going to get into. Then you'll have your little specialties.
Mm-hmm. And of those, the sprint is 5 kilometers and it encompasses 20 obstacles. The super is 10 kilometers and it is 25 obstacles. The beast is 21. It has 30. The ultra, otherwise known as an ultra beast, is 2 laps of the ultra plus the ultra loop for 50 kilometers.
2 laps of the beast.
Yeah, sorry. 2 laps of the beast plus the ultra loop for 50 kilometers. And that's normally 60 plus obstacles. And yeah, let's just stay with that first. And these are normally done on at a mountainous venue or at a ski hill or again at a stadium. And what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to run that set distance and get through all the obstacles. Yeah, so we've got those 5 main distances. And then I think I do want to touch base on the fact that, so then there's endurance events. Like we said, there's hurricane heats, which are not a race. It's like a boot camp style, try to make you quit, and it's team-based and individual-based. And those are further separated into a 4-hour, a 12-hour, and a 24. in that endurance kind of world, there is the death race, summer and winter, and then the agogis, which are a completely immersive experience. So that would be the endurance side of things.
Then you have trail.
Trail races, which is a Spartan race without the obstacles.
It's just a trail race, like
Yep.
any other race that you'll find, but it's at the Spartan locations where they're doing the obstacle course races as well.
And those vary in distances depending on the venue and the location, what they're going to offer.
10Ks, 21Ks.
I think there was an ultra. I don't know.
There might be.
But in that capacity, there's trail. And then, like we said, the stadium events will be held like at the Canada Centre, or it's going to be at a stadium of some sorts, and they're going to put on those same distances, but they're going to have the obstacles in amongst a stadium. Again, like if you saw one in Toronto, which we don't have one, but you know what I mean? Like we could have Fenway is a great one. Fenway Stadium offers the weekend, and you'll do all the obstacles in the Fenway Stadium. So they do offer it outside of mountainous hills.
Yeah, if you want a flat, well, I guess you have to run up and down like the stairs, but that's the extent of it. You're not going through.
Yeah, you're not going through a mountainous terrain with the technical and I love it, but it hurts. So I think that's a perfect segue into, okay, so we're saying obstacles. Like, what are we going to face?
Can we pause?
So I always break it down to you're going to be crawling, you're going to be carrying, you're going to be climbing, and you're going to be throwing. I think are the big ways of looking at it, right?
Before we get into that, though, I think we need to break down how you can race. So you could either do open heats, or you could do age groups, or you could do elites.
Okay, yep. So when you show up at a race, you're going to notice different headbands. And if you look at any of our photos that I'm about to put up here, you're going to notice that we're wearing different color ones. And in those colors separates how you're going to do the race. So open heats are very generic. That's what I would suggest most people go for their first one, because there's less stringent rules.
Very little rules. Get it done, however that looks. If you need help, if you want to try it on your own, if you want to try it multiple times.
Yeah, there's everyone wearing the black headband for an open heat is expected to just kind of go through the race. You can help each other. You should be doing all of the penalties, but you can get help at almost all of the obstacles. You're not being held to a higher standard, I think is the easiest way, because you're there just to do it.
Just to have the experience.
Yeah, to have the experience. And both of us, like I've raced a lot of competitive, but we've both done a lot of open heats, and we've brought a lot of our athletes first time going through Spartan into open heats because we get to do it with them. Mm-hmm. There is very little worry towards how the race gets done in open heat, or the early morning heat, which is a part of open, versus the age group and the elite heats. I think that's a good way of differentiating the two, because then when you get to the red headbands, which are age groups where you're going to be bracketed within a 5-year age group of whatever your age is, or the elites, which are people competing for, top podium spots, those you can't muck around with. Those ones you can't receive help.
It's an independent race that has to follow set rules.
Yeah, and if you're caught breaking them or you were caught getting help, you're not going to
You're going to be disqualified.
You're going to be DQ'd or get a DNF on it. And normally you see people transition from open heat into the age groups when they've done a few and they're looking for an extra challenge, and you're really looking to test yourself, because in an open heat, everyone is out there to just have fun. And I don't say that that's not there in the age group, but everyone's out there to just have fun, pushing at their absolute best. People are competing. When I do age groups, I have a great time. Like I've done age groups with friends, but we're competing. At the end of the day, it's me trying to get to the finish line as fast as I can. Mm-hmm. And in the elites, even more. So that's the Olympic level of Spartan, as you see the elites. So I think that's a really good segue there of when you go to these events, you're always going to find that there's going to be an open heat, including early morning. So if you do need a little bit more time, which we'll get to about cutoffs and everything, but open heats, black headbands, age groups and elites are going to have the red headbands and just more stringent rules. And that's kind of what you're going to be dealing with at your typical Spartan races. So, and when we said this about the rules, why are there rules? Well, in an obstacles, or with the obstacles in the Spartan races, you have kind of two. You have mandatory and you have penalty. You must get through the mandatory obstacles regardless if you're in open or the age group elite.
Yeah, if you cannot complete them, then you get disqualified from the race.
Yeah, it's Spartan. What I love about it in their mentality is it's not a participation award race. You have to do it. You have to be able to get through it. And that's where I said there's the differentiation between open versus the age group. Because in open, essentially you can use any means necessary to get through. If you have to have a friend throw you over one of the walls, c'est la vie. If you have to piggyback your wife across the monkey bars because she hurt herself, again, c'est la vie. You can do that in the open heat. There are really no rules so long as you do it. Mm-hmm. Going so far, though, if you're going to a race on your own and you can't get past, say, a penaltied obstacle, you have to touch it. You have to have attempted it, and then you can go and do the penalty. With the open, again, you like the mandatory obstacles, you have to find your way through one way or another. Otherwise, you're not going to finish, but you can have the help. Penalty ones, again, if you're running age group or elite, you're going to have to get through it, and if you can't, you're going to have to do the penalty loops. And that's the perfect segue again to say, what are these penalties? Well, now Spartan has brought back the burpees, which I am so happy they did. If you fail an obstacle that's a penaltied obstacle, you're going to either have to do 30 burpees in a burpee zone before you can move on, or you're going to have to do a penalty loop. And the penalty loops are anywhere between 200 to, I think we've seen up to 600 meters or so, additional compared to the track that you're running, and they're normally uphill or they're hard. They're not meant to be easy. It's going to be comparable to the time it would take you to do the obstacle. So you see some racers, and I'm not a huge fan of it, that won't do the obstacles. They'll just kind of touch it and do the penalty loop.
The runners.
But the nice thing about these penalties is that it's not necessarily faster. I mean, some would argue that it is, but I mean, that's a different style of racing that we're not going to go into. If I'm going to do the obstacle and you're going to do the penalty loop, we're going to finish about the same time. I think that's the best way of saying those. And again, if you're wearing a red headband, you're going to be held to those standards. If you're wearing a black headband, again, people don't really care. You just got to get through to the end. So that covers the types, like the two different categories of obstacles. But what are things that you're going to see? So I think that's a perfect thing of, you know what, let's talk about venues first, and then we can go into the obstacles. Because I find the obstacles, there's so many of them for us to really dive into. But being in Northern Ontario and racing on the Eastern Canada side, let's really talk about our venues and why, because then we can talk about how to do some of the obstacles. Because we're going to talk about how some courses are better for them and some are worse. It'd be easier to talk about the venues, I think. And then, so venues. What's your favorite venue?
Blue Mountain.
Why?
By far. Well, in Canada, Blue Mountain. It's the first place that we raced, so it just holds a special place in my heart, first of all. But second of all, it's the perfect mix of technical, hill, like tire you out, but also runnable. Like there are a lot of flat spots, there are a lot of like trail or like running through the village, so it's like not concrete, but like brick or whatever. Versus Tremblant, you're through a incline like this in the forest in rock and just good luck, don't die. So,
and see, it's funny, Tremblant is my favorite venue. I love the area. I love the technicality of the running and the trails, and it's hard. When we were talking about this yesterday, when we tried to do the podcast, I had mentioned how so we started at Blue Mountain in 2022. That was our first. I did the super, and then we did the sprint with our friends Pat and Andy. Your first was the sprint there, and that was a rude awakening for us to get welcomed into Spartan. And then we went to Tremblant, and Tremblant just pushed the parcel so much further for how difficult these races can be. And that's where I fell in love with it, because that was hard.
That was so hard. 2023, anyone who did Tremblant, they were mean when they made the course.
It's very, very steep ascents. The technicality of the terrain that you're going to face in Tremblant is huge. And then when we raced it that one year, it was like 30 degrees and hot in the bottom. And then as you were climbing to the top of the mountain, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face.
It was snowing.
That is not for you. It was snowing at the top. So I'm going to facepalm a cat here. That's not for you. Yeah, so we were climbing to the top, and then you couldn't see your hand in front of your face because of how cold and humid it was that it actually started to snow. So the elevation game and the altitude was huge at Tremblant. But why I like it so much, I think, is because they started to introduce it to the village. So where we stayed last year for our Ultrafecta weekend, we had crew staying with us at the hotel, and we would race down like 10 feet from where the hotel was. So it was a super immersive experience, which is then brought forward into Blue Mountain. Mm-hmm. You can't have it, buddy. And yeah, so I like Tremblant for the difficulty and the immersion, I think, for venues. Plus, it's something to note that not every venue offers every race. So Blue Mountain and Tremblant are trifecta weekends, which we're going to get into, but that's offering all three, the sprint, the super, and the beast. And in the case of Tremblant, the ultra as well for an ultrafecta weekend. But venues like Calabogie and Brimbacombe only offer the
sprint and super.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so they only offer the sprint and the super, and then obviously either the trail or a hurricane heat. So not every venue offers every race, and not every venue is created equal. Mm-hmm. So Blue Mountain and Tremblant are harder venues. They have far more elevation you're going to have to do. They offer more races. They're personally far more technical, that I find.
Well, they're ski hill mountains versus something like
Calabogie.
That's on a golf course.
With a ski hill mountain, but I'm being modest trying to give it credit. Like, it's kind of a ski hill.
That's a golf course.
Yeah, I know, but where we do the run they do have the elevation, but it's like a ski mound.
It's like a bunny hop little.
I think ski hill versus ski mountain. Blue Mountain and Mont Tremblant are mountains, but Calabogie and Brimbacombe are ski hills. So I think that's kind of the differentiation that I would say. But that brings us to it, Calabogie. So Mont Tremblant, Quebec. It's the Ultrafecta weekend. Staying in that venue, like by far my favorite. It's beautiful. It offers a lot of amenities. The venue, which we'll get into, is amazing. I think that's my favorite venue because they just do so much there. Amazing. Coming more west now, we have Calabogie. And Calabogie is outside of Arnprior. It's on a golf course with a ski hill. Probably a far more effective first-timer venue because you're not going to destroy yourself doing elevation on the hill. That being said, though, it's not necessarily an easy venue because of the difficulty that they get from arranging the obstacles and the type of obstacles that they put in.
And the time of year that Calabogie is held, it's in August, and that's our hottest time of year. So you could be running Tremblant in June and it's maybe 10 degrees, but then you do Calabogie in August and it was 45 degrees last year. Mm-hmm. So that added a whole new element.
Absolutely. And then, again, further eastward, you have Brimbacombe outside of Toronto. It's another ski hill venue. Probably, I would say that Brimbacombe is the easiest of all of them. And then you have Blue Mountain, which ups that ante again. It's Ontario's staple for Spartan events. So now that you have an idea, because again, we haven't raced Red Deer, which is a flat course out west, and we haven't raced Kelowna, which is a mountainous course out west, and Kelowna is harsh. Kelowna's hard from what I've heard. And if you have raced it, let me know in the comments so other people can read about how you've found those races, because again, we haven't had the opportunity to go out west, but we've done all of the Eastern Canada ones. And you've heard me talk a lot about venues, and that's where before we get into the obstacles, I think I want to pick your brain about what you've found about the venues, because no venue is created equal. And why we love some courses like West Virginia so much is because of the venue experience. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, the perfect segue to let everyone listening know. So you can have a race experience, and we're going to talk about the community and the people out on the hill and what you're going to experience when you're doing your first race. But the venue, the venue. So start in Tremblant. I love Tremblant. The venue is amazing. The village is amazing. The venue is on the other side. So like there's the Tremblant village, and then you have to go around the mountain to get to the Spartan venue. So it's far enough removed that it feels like it's its own isolated event, but it's super easy to get to. And the venue, how they host the venue on that side of the mountain is amazing. The energy. I mean, we've never had a bad time there with the DJ, with the the vendors that show up, with the size of the venue itself. It feels like you're at a giant fitness rave. I think it's kind of cool. And then again, you go up and over the mountain, and you actually, last year, like you came down and you were in the Mont Tremblant village for at least the ultra. We came all the way down.
We did for the beast a little bit. There was a wall, the 8-foot wall, and maybe a carry or something like that.
But the super and the sprint stayed on the one side.
Yeah.
Downfall to that, though, is the Spartan venue, unless they change the dates, it is the weekend before the Mont Tremblant Ironman. So the amount of people that are in the village is substantial. And while you're trying to get to and from the venue, the bikers on the road.
Yeah.
That's something that you do have to think about, because if you want a quieter venue for your first experience, then
don't do Tremblant.
Don't do Tremblant. And amenities I also want to touch is that you can stay anywhere in the Mont Tremblant region. You can Airbnb it in the surrounding areas. You can stay in the village itself. It's pretty accommodating for staying for the weekend. And like, because it's a tourist destination, they have plenty of space. Calabogie, on the other hand, it sucks to try and think about finding accommodations for Calabogie.
It's brutal.
Unless you're staying in the golf resort itself, you're staying at least a minimum of a 40-minute drive away.
Oh, yeah.
Minimum. You can Arnprior, you can go Ottawa. I mean, I slept in the car before my hurricane heat. Like, there's the amount of accommodations in Calabogie are limited.
Yeah.
It's also in a really weird spot. So it's a great first-time racing location, but it's hard to think about, like, it's limited access, I guess, is the best way, for better lack of words. The venue itself, though, it's nice. It's the perfect first-time venue that I would ever suggest for someone. It's big enough, but not overwhelming.
Yep.
The course is really fun. I love the course and the way they lay it out, and that's where I was saying, like, different venues offer different difficulties, because it's not Tremblant level hard. It's difficult in how they organize the obstacles. They also offer obstacles that you can swim. And not every venue offers water obstacles, which I think is really cool. So Calabogie is, again, one that I would, like, they had the water obstacle with the swim. They had the dunk wall out in, like, their pond, lake.
It's a little dirty, but it's refreshing when it's that hot.
Yep, it was a nice change. Brimbacombe is another one of those super small venues. Probably for Ontario, it's my least favorite. It's in the middle of nowhere. Accommodations around it are sparse. You're staying, again, a decent drive. Like, it's close to Toronto, which is nice for our Southern Ontario folks, but if you're traveling to get there, there's not much in means of, like, accommodations to stay at. And the venue itself is tiny, super tiny. Now, they make up for it, because when we first went for our hurricane heat in 2023,
Yep, 2023.
we had a, like, almost 300-meter barbed wire crawl through, like, arms deep mud up a hill.
Oh, and there were, like, divots with rocks, like you were trying to dodge blowing a knee out.
So the difficulty that they were able to give to the obstacles was huge, but the venue itself, again, very easy. And again, it was small. It was because it was so limited access, the venue felt kind of lackluster. But first timers coming into a Spartan race that wanted to complete one without absolutely destroying themselves, that was a perfect venue. I know a lot of people who did their first Spartans there.
And if you don't want to get overwhelmed with people and all that kind of stuff, like, it can be a little bit confusing to navigate. So, like, navigate into the start corral and where do you get stuff and all that. Because if it's a big venue, it's all spread out. But when it's something smaller, it's a little more condensed. I just find it easier to get through it.
And then Blue Mountain, which, again, it's the holy grail staple for Ontario Spartans. I love that venue. It's probably the most immersive, too, because you will literally, on all of the races, it was not just the Beast or an Ultra that Tremblant offered that went through the village. Every single race ran through the village. So it was really cool. Even if you weren't there racing, if you just happened to be in Blue Mountain Village that day, you'd be walking next to where the race was running, through shops and cafes, and a little chaotic.
A little bit.
But So fun for us as racers, and the energy that you were picking up from spectators was huge, because
That's the thing. The energy was insane. It was like a party.
in the middle of one of the squares, which is surrounded by all of the restaurants, literally in the heart of the village, we had that A-frame cargo net that you see spectators sitting eating, and you're watching someone climb 30 plus feet in the air over this cargo net, coming down and then running. Like, it was, the energy was huge. The best venue in, like, the case of, again, what they offer and how they portray it, it's so spread out, it's so jam-packed with vendors and spectators, and just it's such a fun experience. That's where we did our first, and again, I would suggest anyone to go to if you're really looking for a fun Spartan experience. But that being said, it's a hard venue. Even the sprint, as much as they're easier races, that was hard, especially our first go round, right? Like I said, we haven't been able to experience Red Deer Kelowna. I've heard great things. Changes kind of year to year, but you are always expecting Red Deer to be more flat, a little bit quieter, and then Kelowna's the big blowout for all at West. And then we talk about things like West Virginia, which is the only U.S. Spartan race that we've done, but West Virginia is on point. Everything about West Virginia Spartan is, like, that holds a special place in my heart. Like, that's the favorite venue for me.
Yeah, me too.
They do a really good job. And that's, I think, a little bit of a testament difference between Spartan US and Spartan Canada, because they are very different. And that's something to note if you're going on the site. They are very different in the website, in how the venues are ran, and the races themselves. They have different obstacles. So there is a difference between Canada and US Spartan, even though they are all under one umbrella. But yeah, venue makes a difference. So thinking about where you might want to race your first Spartan is big. I think that's almost just equally as important as which race you're going to start out with. But with that, let's talk community for a second, because we're talking about all these venues and why we're having so much time. Like, what's your experience with the community?
People are really helpful, and it's not as intimidating as I was expecting. Like, the first race that I ever did, I thought these were going to be really intense, really into their own individual race kind of people. And I'm like, there are some people like that in the more competitive heats. But for the majority of the time, people are incredibly helpful, incredibly supportive. That's the whole mantra of Spartan, is that you don't leave anyone behind. You're going to help each other through it. So you really feel that energy out on the course, and it makes it much more enjoyable and much more attainable. It wasn't intimidating at all. You walk up to an obstacle and you're like, how the hell am I supposed to do this? And someone will show you, someone will help you through it, someone will give you pointers, people will just be cheering you on as you're failing.
Very supportive community.
Yeah.
Especially, and again, when we look, it's still in the age group, but you're limited into how much help you can give. But in the open, oh man, like, there's not a person that you'll meet a friend randomly on a mountain. You'll make 10 friends throughout the race, depending on how you're running. I mean, we've given out goodies to people to try and perk them up because they needed nutrition. How many supportive hugs, or a shoulder to cry on, or a hand to hold to get up the mountain. And these are just strangers. I've had it happen to me, and I've done it to strangers. I mean, there's a running joke when we run Spartans is, we start together and then I go off and I find new friends on the hill, because of just, again, the people you meet and how interactive and how supportive the community is. It's competitive, but it's a supportive competitive. It's not a
cutthroat.
Yeah, it's not me versus you. It's us on the mountain. And they do embody the whole leave no man behind. So no fallen comrade. Like, everyone is there to make sure that you get to the end, with the exception that you have to be willing to get to the end. But so supportive, so friendly. And even the volunteers, the spectators, it's a very encouraging environment. So if you're thinking about doing a Spartan and you're worried about it being judged, or, not having help on the mountain, I mean, I've seen people of all shapes and sizes, literally all shapes and sizes. Ages. We once raced in West Virginia against a 92-year-old who did the entire course with the Oscar Mike group, which was really cool. They have kids races. I guess we didn't mention that, but they have different distance kids races. And I think that segues into the venue too, right? The community is just bumping. I'll put if I have some video of what it looks like, I'm going to put it up here, and you can just see, like, what we're talking about with the music and just how friendly people are.
Awesome. There you are. Have a good time. Bye.
I am Spartan! I am Spartan!
Aru! Aru! Go!
So let's talk obstacles, because I think that's the next. Like, we've talked about how there's different types of obstacles. We talked about the penalties. We talked about how the courses lay it differently. But what about the obstacles themselves? What's your favorite?
My favorite obstacle would have to either be twister or multi-rig. So twister is kind of like monkey bars, like at a child's playground of having little monkey bars, little rings. But the twister is a little handle that you have to grab, and as you grab the handle, the whole bar spins. So you have to keep spinning and traversing these little metal handles. That or multi-rig, like I said, that's rings. That there's 3 rings into like a steel bar, and then into 3 more rings before you could finish it. So I think multi-rig is my all-time favorite. The only thing that they've changed recently that I'm not a huge fan of is that they've raised the bar higher than the rings. So you have to go from a lower to an upper, and when I swing to get the momentum, I always jam my hand into like the hollow end of the tube, and it fucking hurts. But if you can not do that, not be clumsy like me, then that one's...
And your least favorite?
I don't like the carries to begin with, just because
They're hard.
they're uphill, and like the bucket carry in, I think it's Calabogie, is done on a tennis court. Sure, all day long I will do that. But when you make me carry a bucket up a hill, over a like the road rail thing, down another hill and back up it again, like walking with weight is so hard for me. So I find either the carries or the hard obstacles like Olympus or Stairway to Sparta that I just haven't conquered yet. I forgot about Bender. I love Bender as well. That one is like that to me feels like a jungle gym.
A difficult jungle gym.
Yeah, but I just feel like I can launch myself over it, so it's freeing.
See, and my favorites are my least favorites. I love Olympus and Stairway to Sparta. Love them. They are the most difficult obstacles. And I love them because I've done them and I've found my technique with them. But the reason why they're my least favorite is because depending on where they are in the course, it makes or breaks it. Yeah. So we've talked about the difference in races, the sprint, super, and the beast. In the sprint, you're going to have the base set of obstacles. You're going to have all the carries. You're going to have all of the crawls. And then as far as the upper, like overhead and the climbs go, you're going to have the introduction. Everyone will do the spear throw, which is the most failed obstacle in every Spartan.
Everyone will do the rope climb. The 4 and 6 foot walls are in the sprint.
But as far as overhead, you get more of an introduction to them.
Yeah.
The super, you start to get some more difficult ones. You get the Stairway to Sparta.
Twister.
Bender. So more difficult. And then in the beast, you get the most difficult. That's the Olympus in every one. That's the Tyrolean Traverse.
8 foot wall, things like that.
They get substantially harder the bigger the race that you do. And then in the Ultra, you're going to do that beast one twice, sometimes with more. And then venue to venue specific locations, they'll change obstacles. So Blue Mountain normally doesn't have a water obstacle.
It's in October, so it gets too cold.
Where Calabogie always has an water obstacle. And in fact, it has 2. You had the swim last year, and then you had the dunk wall out in the lake. Mm-hmm. West Virginia had a 1 kilometer swim.
That was mean.
At kilometer 16 in the beast. And then the second you got out of that water cramping, you had to do your second bucket carry. So sometimes you'll double up on certain obstacles. So and then like the rolling mud that we had to do. They had to change the barbed wire crawl to be called the rolling mud. And they made a barbed wire crawl difficult, in which I'm going to put it up because I didn't get video of me doing it, but I got video of you and Courtney doing it. And I think that's because I'm going to ask you next your most memorable. But to me, watching you do that one was the most memorable because West Virginia is hot. It's so hot. And it was so hot on the day that we were doing the beast that one of the volunteers, or maybe one of the workers, I don't remember what shirt he was wearing, had nothing else to do. So he grabbed a fire pump, hooked it up to the water, like the lake that we had to swim through, and then took a fire hose. And anyone who stopped in the barbed wire crawl was just pegging them with water. And like not a little bit of water, like a fire hose amount of water to convince you to keep moving. And that it soaked the entire area, making it even more muddy. It made the divots filled with water. It was the best, worst torture I've ever had on the Spartan course. And watching you guys go through it was fun too, because in that moment I didn't have to experience it again. I just got to watch you guys get it, so that was fun. What about you for most memorable?
For me, the most memorable moment was doing my first ever beast. I went from doing a 5K sprint in Blue Mountain to a 21 kilometer beast in Tremblant. That was my next jump. So I didn't even think I was going to be able to finish it. Like, that course was brutal. And I was 7 hours in and like 25 kilometers into this race, because you have regular kilometers and then you have Spartan kilometers. And I didn't know how much farther I had to go. I was running out of energy, and I came down the mountain and I saw you cheering me on. And that gave me a little bit of extra oomph and energy to finish what still took me another hour and a half to get through the like 200 meters, but it was just obstacle back to back to back. And I was so exhausted that I kept doing penalty after penalty. But having you there cheering me on, I could hear you through everything that I did. That kept me pushing. So that's very memorable to me, because of the mindset that I was in, that I didn't even think that I could do it, let alone finish it. So having that push me through sticks with me.
I would say, yeah, other than watching the rolling mud, I think meeting you guys on my ultra attempt last year in 2024 was also a big memorable moment, because doing the ultra and you guys were on the beast, I met you on my second lap coming up at the top of the mountain. And then obviously I had to go and do the ultra loop and everything else. So I didn't think I was going to see you guys again. Mm-hmm. And then literally finding you not 2 or 3 obstacles from the finish line, where we were able to meet back up and then cross it together.
Yeah.
And everything said that we were going to be separate on that. Like mine was 10.5 hours for the 50K. You guys did it in
6.5.
So time difference shouldn't have allowed us to meet up. The fact of where I met you guys and what we had to do shouldn't have lined up, but it did. And that was cool being able, because that was my ultrafecta finish. Mm-hmm. And it was redemption.
Your redemption, yeah.
Because that time where I met you, when you came down the mountain, I had failed that I had DNF'd that ultra. So it was exciting, but I was sitting there kind of in my feels because I had DNF'd. So then getting to do that redemption with you the next year was super memorable. And it's funny, I think, just again, testament to the experiences. You don't know what kind of experience you're going to have when you show up to these races. But it wasn't the race that was cool for us. It was that experience, right? So, and then I also want to touch base. You said Spartan kilometers. So let everyone else know that, because I know what you mean, but.
So when you sign up for a sprint, that's supposed to be 5K, a super is supposed to be 10K, and a beast is supposed to be 21K. So take out penalties, because penalties are going to add mileage to that distance. But I have never run a race that has equated to what it called for. 95% of the time, if you're doing a 5K, you're actually doing 7. If you're doing a 10K, you're actually doing 12. And if you're doing a 21, you're actually doing 24 at a minimum. 1 year in Calabogie, I think we got about like 8.5, 9K for a super. It was a little bit under. That was a very nice surprise. Maybe I took a shortcut and I didn't realize. I don't know.
But I've never had one that was under. It's always been over. Even my ultra was like 52. And again, we talked about penalty loops. If you fail the obstacles and you're adding up anywhere between that 200 to 600 meters per obstacle,
yeah, and you have 30 obstacles.
Your 10K could become 20.
Yeah.
It can. But if you run a clean race, there's no penalties, you nail all your obstacles, which I've had. Like I've had a perfect race where I got all of them, including the spear throw, and my watch on the beast was still 24K.
Yeah.
And so it's called the Spartan mile or the Spartan kilometer, because it's measured, but is it?
Yeah. It's a suggestion. It's not a hard rule.
So then I think let's talk trifectas. Like, what's a trifecta?
Okay, so if you do a sprint, a super, and a beast all in one calendar year, so January to December, you'll earn what's called a trifecta. If you do multiple of those in a year, you'll earn your trifecta times 2, times 3, however many that you do. So that just, you get a little wedge at the back of your medal, and what it does is they all collect together to form one new looking medal that has a color of each race that you've done. And then if you've done multiple of them, you'll get a separate medal that has times 2 on it or times 3. And then you can do what's called a trifecta weekend. So you do the 5K, the 10K, and the 21K all in one weekend. And it's not a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Saturday, you're doing the beast, you're doing the 21K, and then Sunday, you're starting your morning with the 10K, and you're finishing your afternoon with the 5K.
Now, they do have a sprint on Saturdays now.
Yes.
So if you can do your beast fast enough, you can do that 5K after.
Yep.
Putting that out there because the races have changed since we started doing them.
Yep. So you just have to be able to complete all of them in one weekend, and then you'll get a separate medal called the Trifecta Weekend Medal. So if, like, we have done weekends where it's our Trifecta Weekend as well as a Trifecta times 2 or 3. So we're leaving the weekend with 5 medals because you get one for your super, your sprint, your beast, your times 2 or 3 or whatever, and your weekend.
And I think it's also cool to note too, like, you know, we say these times 2, times 3 medals are really cool. Each one gets bigger.
Yeah.
And we, like some of our racing friends, one of them did the trifecta times 16. And this medal was bigger than his body. Like, it was huge. So they do get bigger, which is cool if you are in for the bling of doing these medals. But I want to preface this that a trifecta weekend is no joke.
No, you need like serious recovery between races because depending on your athletic ability, but like good luck walking after the beast, let alone.
And I think, and we've talked about this, and we're going to do a separate episode on the training for a trifecta weekend. But it's a whole different animal. Like, there'd be so much to talk about in the recovery and the training and the mindset and all the prep that goes into a weekend that it should be an episode in and of its own. But it's nice to know though, like, what is a trifecta weekend or an ultrafecta weekend when we're talking about like what we're signing up for and going to. So I just want to touch base back on the obstacles. We did get away from it. So most failed obstacles, spear throw. I think spear throw.
Rope, like, let's just talk basic as if you're doing a sprint, because so every obstacle that's in a sprint is going to be in a super.
Which is going to be in the beast.
Yes. So the base obstacles from the sprint carry through every race. Then what you have in your super will also be in your beast, plus then some in the beast. So let's just talk sprint for ease sake. The spear throw and probably the rope climb.
Given the fact that it's the more introductory race, yeah, I would say those are probably the 2 most failed obstacles.
And then probably monkey bars, I would say.
Okay.
Because the bars, they're very thick. It's not, you cannot wrap your hand around it like this. You have to like overhand
Hook it.
So if you don't have a good enough grip, or a tip that we could give is if you can go on the inside lanes of an obstacle that's normally drier and less muddy. People seem to go to the outside lanes when they're doing an overhead obstacle, because for the women, that's where they have higher like step stools. So the women are kind of SOL, but if you're tall enough and you could reach from the center lanes, do it.
And I think that's like, this provides the perfect time to also note that if you are looking into your first race and you're listening to this and you're hearing all this and you're like, oh my God, these obstacles, before we get into tips, there is something called the Obstacle Specialist Workshop. Before most trifecta weekends, and sometimes between the Calabogie and like the other ones, on the Friday before in the evening, and you have to pay for this, but it's a course where you get to go with an SGX instructor, something that I was before I lapsed my recertification on it, and we've done the obstacle course specialist, so we know. But you get just time with you, a dedicated Spartan coach, and whoever else is going to be in this course with you, with no spectators, with no other racers, with no one else on the course, and you'll spend hours going through every single obstacle that's out there. And that includes, even though you've never done a Spartan race before, you're going to get to see every single obstacle. And you get time on them without the hustle and bustle of other racers. And the coach will give you different tips, tricks, options, like strategies to try and tackle these obstacles. So if you are worried and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to go do this, it might be worth it to go to one of those. We did it, and we've done a lot of racing, and not only have we met so many cool friends from that, like we still talk to our coach who taught us, Sandy, Brent, like one of our friends that we met in it. Like, again, it's another one of those bonding experiences, but if you're worried about the obstacles, that would be something.
That took a lot of the unknown, uncertainty out of, I'm very anxious, so that took away a lot of that panic because I already had experience with what this looks like, what to expect, how to do it.
And again, I link it back to like whenever I race, even in the opens, and we've brought tons of new athletes with us, introducing them for their first time. I mean, while I'm waiting for my friends to go through and I see people coming up for the first time, like I'm no longer an ambassador, I'm no longer a coach, but even though I've raced so many times, like I'm there even coaching people like, hey, try this. Like I see that didn't work out for you. Like there's always going to be someone who's going to help you out on those courses, which again, it brings joy to my heart knowing that people aren't out there shit talking other people and bring people down. Like it's, let me help you through this. Like there will be help, I think is the best way of saying it. But yeah, tips and tricks, pick the lanes that are least muddy. It's normally outside lanes are a little bit more muddy on monkey bars, so going towards the insides on those overhead ones are better. Reverse for rope climbs. I find the insides become very condensed with like muddy ropes, and the outsides don't get as much. And maybe it's because people fear that they're going to hit the bars or something like that. But picking the best lane, like there is strategy to it. Pick the best way to do it. Conserve your energy where you can, like rolling underneath the barbed wire crawl versus just dragging yourself through it. Keeping your hands clean. We first started with gloves. I'm not a huge fan of gloves. Now I know you bring them every time, even though we don't use them necessarily.
I bring them for carries because the buckets are kind of sharp and all that kind of stuff. I cannot use them for overhead obstacles or like rope climb or anything like that. But if I need to just hold something like the bucket, that I find... or even walls. Like if I'm trying to pull myself up and over a wall, they're made of like plywood. So it can just get a little scratchy and hurt. Or if I am crawling, that is a good way to keep my hands clean, is if I put the gloves on, they get muddy. The second I take them off, my hands are clean.
Because we have a kind of an age-old saying, you will not leave a Spartan race without being muddy, bloody, and sweaty. And all three of those things, when on your hands, really will affect how you're like your success on obstacles. And there's nothing more defeating than failing every single overhead obstacle because your hands were muddy and you can't clean them off.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, I'll put up again pictures of me covered in mud from the one year at Blue Mountain where it literally snowed and rained all weekend. Like not a chance were you going to be able to do any overhead obstacle if you didn't have clean hands. So I think that's a big one. It's another big tip. Time on feet. Before you go, get time on a hill.
It's hills. Hills and knowing how to pace yourself. You don't have to run up a hill. Like that was the mistake that I made on my very first sprint. I tried to push up this hill as fast as I could just to die. Why? Like hike it, go at a good clip, but you don't need to be running it.
Yeah, you don't need to be running it. It's, walk the uphills, power hike and jog the flats, and then if you can, get used to running some of the downhills or make up at least some of the time going through the downhills. And you don't need to be to do the 10K, you don't need to be able to run 10K, but you need to be able to have time on feet for 10 kilometers. You need to have at least enough experience to be able to power hike the elevation that's going to be in those races. It's not about being able to run that consistently. Again, unless you're going age group or competitive, and that I think also leads into the time caps. So every race will have a time cap. Races start pretty early, with the exception of the sprint. The sprint, normally the latest is 2 o'clock, but venues typically close around 9 or around sundown, depending on what time of year. But you have time. You have so much time. In fact, my hurricane heat instructor, Johnny Redmond, he'd always told us, you can walk a beast.
You can, and you can finish it, but you have to start at the early morning heats.
But you can do it.
Yep.
So look at the time caps, because it's not just about finishing in a certain amount of time. You're going to have to get past certain obstacles by certain times, but you have a lot of time. So you have to be conscious that you can't stop for forever, but you don't need to be busting ass the entire time while you're out on the hill. I think that's another big thing for people showing up. You just need to be able to do the distance. Other tips and tricks. You don't need fancy gear in order to do it, but you do need proper footwear.
Yeah.
Trail shoes are a must.
You can't wear like cleats, like it can't have any sort of like metal spike or anything in it, but definitely get a good trail shoe. That's
With
not just
some
a
tread.
flat runner. Yeah, it has to have good tread.
And they don't need to be expensive. One of our athletes who actually did 3 trifectas with us last year, she got hers off Amazon. I mean, you want to get proper fitting footwear, but get something with some tread. Doesn't need to be expensive. Obviously, if you're going to do more like we do, we invested in some serious trail running shoes, but it's going to save you because you have to remember some of these races are going to be technical. And I mean running single track downhill, over roots, over rocks, through creeks up to your waist, like climbing like inclines where you're literally hands and toes to try and get up.
Oh, in West Virginia, they had a rope on the mountain because you physically couldn't get up the mountain just with your own.
No, you had to go hand over and while like digging your heels
Yep.
into it. So proper footwear is huge. If I were to make one other gear suggestion, invest in a race pack, depending on what race. Like I don't use them for anything shy of a beast. That being said,
I wear my running vest for every race, even if it's just to carry a goo or a snack. Like you never know if someone else is going to need it, if I'm gonna bog and I just want a little pick me up. So
a cheap Amazon vest just to make sure that you have your nutrition, you can carry some water with you. And that's the nice thing is that on course there's ample water stations.
yeah, you don't need that.
No, they have water stations systematically laid out throughout the course. There's tons of cups, there's tons of waters, the volunteers are there. Like you will have access to water. Still like to bring it depending on the race, time of year, all of that. Bringing your electrolytes, bringing some nutrition, again, depending on the level of the course. And sometimes I bring them, like last year, I brought it knowing that I didn't need it, and I was handing them out to other people. Yeah. And that was, I helped those people get through the course, right? Because they just needed something and they didn't have something. And I think that was the thing. I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Mm-hmm. Because they don't, other than water, they don't offer anything on the course itself. Like there is the venue once you're back, but you can't access that when you're halfway through your race. Except for in the States, in West Virginia, they do give out bananas.
And oranges once.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
I didn't see the oranges, but the bananas made a difference for me. I went to that race for the banana.
That was better than the medal or the finisher's t-shirt, the banana. And then other things that you might be wondering is like, can I bring my phone? Especially open heat, absolutely. But bring a waterproof case. You want to make sure that it's going to be protected from the mud and the water. People take video, people take photos. There are photographers on course. Now it does cost money to get those photos. But if you're running with a group of friends, bring your phone. Absolutely. Just get out of the way while you're taking that photo and video.
Yeah.
But you absolutely can bring your phone with you. Just, again, keep it safe. Music, headphones are allowed. You can bring speakers. I know they tell you not to. We have seen it. And when we were talking about this yesterday, just kind of thinking about tips, if you are going to bring a speaker and you're going to be listening to music, I get to each their own, but remember, not everyone likes your taste of music. And it is sometimes very hard to create distance from people on the mountain. So don't force people to listen to your music the entire time. It's there for you to jam out. And it's awesome when we found people that were jamming with their music. But if it's not, that makes, like, you might be having a great time, but remember, you're now taking away from other people. So be conscious.
Yeah, just be considerate about the level, like the noise level.
Yeah, maybe turn it down, maybe have it so that you can just hear it or whoever's right beside you. But like, there have been some people on course that blare it and I can hear them a kilometer away and it's crap music. By my taste, it's crap. Like, I know they're loving it, but so if you're wondering if you can, yes, it has been done. Be considerate, I think, is the best way. And that's be considerate when you're at the obstacles too. Because
yeah, if you're going to be helping people through or trying different techniques, just pick pick a lane that's on the outside.
Yeah, you have every right to be doing that obstacle, but if people are racing, let them race. If you see red headbands coming through, they're competitive. Move. And then if you are running a venue that has the ultra jerseys, which again,
absolutely move.
Absolutely move. Because remember, I'm probably on my second lap coming through. We've been out there for more time. So it's just things to be considerate about. And if it's nice knowing this going into, because we didn't know this our first race. And again, not that these create problems, but this will just set you up to be a really good racer out there, is just having that moment of consideration pays dividends for the race experience for others, which people are going to make your race experience better, make it better for them too, I think is really good. Sunscreen, absolutely. Bug spray, not a bad idea depending on venue.
Yeah.
We're up in the north, so like Mont Tremblant got eaten alive one year. Making sure that you have on you what you need, because again, you're not going to get help. And I think other than that, don't beat yourself up. Have some fun out there. It's meant to be a fun time. And there's an age-old saying, you'll know at the finish line. So you got to get there in order to get the t-shirt and all the bling.
There are no participation trophies or awards. You have to earn it. You have to do what you're supposed to do, and you have to cross that finish line in order to get the shirt, the medal,
Venue specific tips, there's bag check. It is free. I've never had an issue. I've never seen an issue. So you bring a change of clothes, bring a change of footwear. At the end of the race, there's washing stations. You can rinse yourself off because, again, you're going to get muddy, bloody, and sweaty. You can rinse it all off, and then you can get changed because you don't want to track that shit back into your car, I think is another big one.
and it cakes on. So then trying to clean it afterwards is really hard versus at least if you get all the big clumps and all that off, then it makes cleanup post-race much easier.
There's always a merch tent. So if you are missing something or if you do want to pick up that race day swag, there is merch tents, normally debit only.
Yep.
So make sure that you do have your wallet with you. You're going to need your ID to get in. What else is there? Give yourself some time. Don't show up 15 minutes before your race day starts and thinking that you're going to get through it.
Yeah, the lineups are long, and there are normally technical difficulties with their internet connections.
Almost every venue.
Yeah.
So give yourself some time. Like give yourself an ample cushion
At
to be able
least
to
an hour.
Yeah, to get registered, to get your bag check done, to get to where your start line is, to start doing a warm up. That's time. Outside of that, for venues, I think that's really the biggest tips. And then I think that's mainly Spartan. Let's talk hurricane heat, because we've talked a lot about the main races, and so we've said hurricane heats too, because I want to touch on those before we finish up this podcast. Hurricane heats are not a race. They're
time-based events.
They're time-based endurance events. And the goal of the Creptia, or the Cadre, is to make your life hard. I'm going to say that's the nicest way, because they're there to build you up. And that's what each of these events has. They're normally a specific kind of teaching lesson associated to them, and they're meant to make you a better person. They are also built off the warrior ethos, and they will hold you to that warrior ethos. I'm not going to give a lot of this stuff away, though. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're going to have to go look. What is a warrior ethos? Because you're going to get taught it at this event, and you better embody it.
My biggest tip, don't ask questions.
Don't ask questions. It does not matter if you don't know what you're doing. Listen to what they say and get told how to do it differently. Do not ask questions, because if you ask questions, it's going to be made much harder for yourself. And if you want to know more about that, I even have a blog up on the truenorthtacticalfitness.ca site about my 12-hour experience, which really talks about this. Go give that a read. Because the 4-hour is 100% team-based. You get individually graded, where if you get a certain amount of points because you muck it up throughout it, you can get through the end. You're not going to get your wedge. You're not going to get your shirt. You can fail, but it is primarily a team-building event. And everyone will suffer. It's military boot camp. One person's muck-up will be everybody's muck-up. So don't be that person, and know that if everyone's going to suffer. So don't be the person bitching about suffering. Just do it. The 12-hour and the 24-hour, like the 24 is just worse of version of the 12-hour. That's 50-50. You're going to have a lot of team-based events and a lot of individual events. And they're both meant to crush you. My 12-hour was through the night. Started at 11 p.m. and it went till 12 p.m. the next day. So it was 13 hours, really. And it was 50-50. We had 6 teams of 5. You work, eat, you don't sleep, but you're doing everything with your team, and then there'll be individual exercises in it. Again, you get points. If one person fails for your team, all of the teammates will get points, and you don't want that. If you fail an individual thing, you will get points. Certain amount of points docked, guess what? You'll get to the end, and you still will not finish. So it's a matter of listening to the instructions and doing what you're told. Don't ask questions, and I think the best way of explaining it is, if you're going to try and find ways to cut corners and not put out max effort, you're going to fail.
Yep.
You need to be willing to give everything that you have on these courses, because that is what they're there for. They are meant to be hard. And the longer you go, like the 4 hours easy-ish, it's introductory. The 12-hour was difficult. we lost people in both. 4 and 12, we did lose people. They broke. The 24, hard. And then the only thing harder than that is the death race. And the death race, I mean, every year that I've watched the death race go through, there's what, like 2 or 3 winners out of like 100 people that sign up for it. Like they chip away at everybody and they'll break you. And you don't know. You'll get to the very end and they'll let you, but you failed. So it becomes very difficult. But it's a completely different experience. It's not a typical typical obstacle course race. It's its own entity. And again, if you're looking at getting into something like if you have done other trail racing, Spartan does do trail races. Takes all the pressure of the obstacles out. You don't have to worry about it. You're just going to run essentially the same venue.
Yeah, you just get the experience of what a Spartan has to offer in terms of venue and vendors and that atmosphere, but you don't have to put yourself through obstacles if that's not your thing.
And so I think with that, like barring that we're not going to go into the trifecta stuff yet, I think that encompasses everything that you would need to know for your first Spartan race. And I think the biggest thing I want you to take away from this is that if you are nervous, you should be willing to step outside of that comfort zone to try it, because I'm telling you, it's far less bad than what you're making it out to be. It's far less hard too. Like it's difficult. There's no lying there, but it is very accomplishable. You just have to be willing to try. So if you have questions, let me know. I'll get back to you. We'll make another podcast episode about it, or I will just reach out to someone and get you that answer. I would love to see more people going to these events because of what they can do for you. Like this built our fitness to where we're at now. Because of Spartan, I run ultra marathons. Because of Spartans, you're now tackling your first marathon and you've done some crazy shit. And I've always said it in other podcasts, the first Spartan that we went to was the catalyst for us doing this.
Oh, it was the hardest thing I'd ever done, and I couldn't imagine doing anything harder, but it also lit a fire under me of like, cool, I just did this. Now what else can I do? Because that seemed impossible and I did it. So now where's the next limit? And it also showed me where my weaknesses were, hills being one of them, and upper body strength. So I changed my focus to now running up more hills and focusing on doing pull-ups and things like that. So it helped expose weaknesses so that you could grow in those areas so that they're no longer your downfall.
And that's Joe DeSena's big thing. That's why he wanted the Spartan community to be built, because it was to get off the couch. So if you are sitting on the couch and you're watching this video and you're wondering if I could ever do it, I'm telling you to go do it. Find a friend, sign them up. Misery loves company, but go do it, because it's so doable. You just have to be willing to. And you have to be willing to go through discomfort to get there, but the growth.
If you just don't quit.
If you just don't quit, you will get to the finish line. And then you will know at the finish line, as Spartan always says. So yeah, questions around gear, racing, anything like that, let me know. Hit us up in the comments, send me an email, reach out somehow, because we would love to talk more about it. But I hope you got at least the basics covered in Spartan 101 with the Gilberts. And if not, like I said, we'll always talk more. But thank you so much for this episode. I hope this video episode worked out a little bit differently, because again, we're growing too. And I think that's why, with you doing your first sprint, why it's so cool seeing where your fitness grows. We started a podcast and now look at where the podcast grows. So it lit a fire in growth, and I hope that it does for you. Whether you're interested in fitness or not, it'd be really cool to see where you go from doing one hard thing. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you as always for tuning in to Endure and Evolve, and we'll see you at the next episode.